Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hoboken Talks, a pre-recorded episode this time. My name is Ted Rowlands, although everyone knows me as Ted, and I'm on the board of the museum. And I'm delighted to be here with Pastor Elaine.
Thank you.
And so I think I'd like to start off. Here we go. Hello. So I'd like to start off by asking you, how long have you been ordained? What brought you to the ministry? What was your call?
That's a really long story. I won't go into all the details, but I grew up in the church and then fell away from the church, as so many do. But I was a church musician. I was an organist and a choir director, and began to sense fairly early on, because I love the way that liturgy and music, when they are done well and done beautifully, they can lead to an experience of something transcendent. And I began to sense that maybe I wasn't sitting in the right spot in the church. So I began to discern a call to ordained ministry, and it took years before that happened. So I've actually only been a priest for 7.5 years. Oh, okay. I was ordained in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was out of the Diocese of Central Pennsylvania. So, yes, so I have a great love for the church and for God and for the work of the church in the world. And so that's why I'm here.
Fantastic. Ram, should we have the first slide? So is this is Charlottesville?
This is Charlottesville. I included 3 photos from my Charlottesville years in this set, because during the summer of 2017, when we were preparing for the Klan and the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, I was also in conversation with Hoboken, New Jersey, about becoming the rector of All Saints Parish. So there was a lot going on.
Right.
This particular photo was July 8th. That's when the Klan, a group from North Carolina, came to Charlottesville. They were really a sad little band of racists. However, what we realized on that day was that this gathering of clergy and all of those behind us, we had a lot more work to do before the August 12th came around, when it was going to be a much more significant and serious invasion of people coming to Charlottesville.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Next one.
Next one. Where's that?
That is St. Paul's Memorial Church in Charlottesville. I was the associate rector here. It is right across the street from Thomas Jefferson's Rotunda at the University of Virginia. And it was founded as a church for the University of Virginia and continues to embrace that identity. And this picture was taken on the 11th of August at a Friday evening prayer service the night before the Unite the Right rally. Mm-hmm. Our idea had been that back in the height of the civil rights era, they would have these mass prayer meetings the night before in action. So they would bring in Dr. King or Dr. Abernathy and have this great rally to kind of fire up the troops. And so that was the idea behind this. And so we had Dr. Cornell West was there. Reverend Tracy Blackman from Missouri was there. And this was when the Torchlight Rally happened across the way. Right. We did not know that was happening. And I had never seen this church that full. Thank goodness the fire marshal was there, because we were way over full. But it was an incredibly moving experience, with lots of singing of freedom songs and a lot of praying and really a great spirit about it. But then we had to lock the doors and not let people leave, because we were not sure quite what was going on outside at that point.
Oh, wow.
And so we continued singing until it was safe to let people. We accompanied them out some side doors so that everyone could get home. But it started out as a really uplifting event and turned into something quite different by the time it ended.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the next day, the August 12th, 2017. Again, all of this time, my attentions are conflicted, because I'm talking with people in Hoboken while trying to organize the clergy response to what was going on in Charlottesville. And
so this is after Charlottesville.
This is still Charlottesville. This is in August when the Unite the Right rally happened. So we had a march we had an early morning prayer service and then marched to overlook the park where the rally was going to take place. And as you can see, my bishop is behind me. One of the rabbis is next to me. Another rabbi came down from Philadelphia. It was an incredibly diverse clergy response to what was going on. And people came from all over the country to help us counter protest what was going on. And it's certainly a formative time. I mean, I was not a very young woman. However, I continued to learn and to understand about community organizing and how you can gather people. If you ask them to come, they show up. And it was quite a momentous day for us.
Did your group meet the United Right Group?
There were two. Well, we encountered them from one side of the park. There was another group that blocked the entrance to the park. So my job was to lead this group to the First Methodist Church, which overlooked the park where the Lee statue stood then and no longer does. And another group came from the other side, and they were the ones that were blocking the entrance and kind of got shoved aside so that the heavily armed Unite the Right folks could enter the park. Yeah. So this sets the stage for my coming to Hoboken.
I see. The next one, please.
And here we are. This is All Saints Episcopal Parish in Hoboken. I love the facade of the church. I love that, the Episcopal Church welcomes you. Has been forever the tagline of the Episcopal Church. And we still continue to get a lot of people who show up at our church because we do put a rainbow flag out, or we put out a Black Lives Matter sign, or a lot of people understand that they want to be a part of a very inclusive congregation.
When you were looking through available positions, what attracted you to Hoboken, would you say, or to All Saints?
I actually tried not to come to Hoboken, and I don't know if I should say that publicly. I mean, I love Hoboken. I actually have something of a history here. We used to come up, we would drive up from outside of Philadelphia, and we'd park in Hoboken. That's back when you could park on the street for free. And we would go to Johnny Rockets for lunch and then go into the city for a show. And that was always my son's birthday present in November. So I had and we had a friend who lived here for a couple of years, and we knew we liked it here. But All Saints at that time had been going through a bit of a rough patch. And I knew that. And thankfully, the search committee was very open about the difficulties that they had endured for about 4 years at the time they were talking with me. And so I was a finalist for another couple of positions that would have been much more calm, perhaps much more stable, much more boring.
I was going to say, right.
And so I could not resist. It got to the point where I could not resist it. And so here we came to Hoboken, and some of the attraction is that this is a congregation that the work that I had done in Charlottesville, they really were paying attention to that it was a public facing ministry, and they wanted a continuation of that. So that was a big part of why they wanted me. So here we came. My first day was February 1st, 2018. Yes. Wow. Next slide.
Who's this?
That is my grandfather, Dr. John Austin Ellis. He was a Baptist minister. At this time, he was shortly after getting his doctorate in theology at Wake Forest, and the theological school, not the university. And he was a chaplain in the Army in World War I. And that cross that he has there is the Army Chaplain's Cross on his collar, which I have, and I wear it on Veterans Day, or when we're near Veterans Day, Armistice Day, every November. And what I learned after coming here, I did not know this, is that he disembarked in Hoboken when he returned from France in 1919. And so it was a bit of my personal history that I did not know about until I got here. So it seemed a bit poetic that here I am in Hoboken, and my grandfather, who I actually never met, he died just before I was born, that he also had a Hoboken connection.
Were you brought up Baptist?
I was not. I was always an Episcopalian. My father never converted. Both of my parents actually grew up Baptist, but in sleepy little small town North Carolina, my mom thought that it would be a little bit more respectable. I don't know. She was looking for a veneer of polish. And so she joined the Episcopal Church. My father, as I was growing up, from time to time would take me to the Baptist church. And there were times when I said, "Can I go up for the altar call?" And he would say to me, your mother will kill me. So really? I never did that. But so he never became an Episcopalian, although he attended church with us most of the time. But yes, I grew up in the church. I sang in the choir from the time I was a young child. Started playing the organ in the church when I was 15. And it was really music and liturgy that got me hooked. And it's a lot of what keeps me here now.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Next. Well, one of the first things that we did when we got here, that's my husband, Tim, and me, we volunteered. Once a month, there's All Saints Night at the Hoboken Shelter. So this was our first experience doing that, helping to prepare and serve a meal for the guests. And the Hoboken Shelter was founded by Communities of Faith for Housing. And All Saints was one of those communities of faith that originally founded the shelter back in 1982. Right. And so we continue to maintain that connection. I serve on the board there as the rector of this parish. Okay. And we have the current president of the board is a member of All Saints, and we have another person who's on the board who heads the development committee. So we're deeply invested in moving people from homelessness to housing, and it's an issue I strongly believe in. So that was just my first experience at the shelter. Next.
The Jubilee.
The Jubilee Center. This picture was a more recent. It was taken spring of 2020, one of the last events that was held at the Jubilee Center. It was the Spelling Bee. You know, the Jubilee Center was also founded by All Saints as a way of making sure that the children, particularly from the Housing Authority in Hoboken, had a place to go where they could receive tutoring, after-school help, recreational activities, other enrichment activities that they might not otherwise get. And over the years, as more organizations, including the Hoboken School District, began to offer these sorts of things, it became more and more of a challenge for us to keep the building, which was a fairly costly building, and to provide the programming and to get the grants and funding to actually do it. And we had fewer and fewer children taking advantage of the programming. So the board, also I sit as ex officio chair of that board as the rector of All Saints. We determined that we really needed to sell the building so that we could free ourselves up to figure out what the future holds. And we're still working on that part. Okay. But the building recently did sell to the city of Hoboken, and we are still hoping that we will have opportunities for community groups to use the space. That is still uncertain, but that is certainly our hope, because there are a lot of good people doing good work, providing for children and families in this city. The greatest need they have is for space. And we hear that. I hear that from everyone. So I am hopeful that we'll have some kind of footprint there, but we'll have to see.
Okay.
This is a joyful noise service. Before COVID, the All Saints Episcopal Day School, which is now independent of the parish, although it was founded by the parish in 1985. Part of my early work here was seeing that independence move through to its completion. And then we decided we would start doing a morning prayer service once a week on Thursday mornings at 7:45, I think. I can't even remember what time it started. And so Jill Singleton, who is the head of school, but she's also an Episcopal deacon, which is an ordained position in the Episcopal Church. She and I would alternate presenting some kind of activity or story or lesson to the children. We'd sing some songs. And it's something that I really miss, those early mornings gathering there in the church with children. Those are parents from the children. And sometimes we would get as many as 30 people, which is really extraordinary for a school morning early. And we had a good core of people that would come, and it was very enjoyable. But then after COVID hit and we stopped worshiping and at that point having school in person, we have not resumed that as of yet. But that space was used as a 7th grade classroom by the school. so that they could expand their space last academic year, because the school building is old and narrow and the classrooms are small and they just needed more space. So we are delighted to share that space with All Saints Day School. It's a relationship that is very important to us.
So when was this?
This was on March 24th, 2018. This was at the March for Our Lives. Now, right after I arrived in Hoboken, the shootings at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School in Florida happened. And I was still kind of in a community organizing mode. And I heard that, there was going to be this nationwide march. There was the big one was in Washington. There was going to be one in Washington, D.C. But I didn't have the time or the leisure to try to attend one of those locations. And so I said, well, why don't we just have a local march? And I very quickly realized after I decided we'd do that I didn't know anybody in Hoboken, so I couldn't exactly community organize. Fortunately, there were some very good people. Councilwoman Emily Ball-Jabbour, who's the head of Moms Demand Action on Gun Violence, she reached out to me when she heard I wanted to do this, and so she helped rally some of her people. And I had assumed we were going to start this at the Jubilee Center outside and then march to City Hall, which is not terribly far. We cut through Church Square Park. I reached out to the police department and I said, well, we're not going to walk in the street. We'll have maybe 100 people. No big deal. Maybe you just have someone look out for us. Well, as it turned out, we had 1,000 people at this march. And I later found out that the police radios and the fire department radios were buzzing because they saw this mass of people blocking traffic in the street and they had to figure out a way to redirect. But the smile on my face there it was when I first turned around when I got to the rally and I realized how many people were standing out in front of City Hall. And I was very proud to say it was more people than the Jersey City March. So I'm feeling a little bit of pride about that.
And this is within weeks of becoming rector?
I had been here for about 6 weeks at that point. And the children behind are from various schools. Mostly the Hudson School is represented. I think Mustard Seed is there. A number of, actually, I see someone from the charter school. And because it was intended to include the children. And so a couple of the children spoke as well. But I learned a real lesson then that you really have to have relationships in the community in order to organize things. And I was a bit naive when I got here. I was still floating on the Charlottesville, everybody knows me, I know everybody. And then I realized, oh, I'm the new kid in town. And it wasn't quite so easy here, but it was a really significant event. And I was very pleased that we had the kind of turnout we did, not for my own pride, but because it was a really important statement. The more marches there were around the country, the more impact I think it had. And so I was very glad that Hoboken we stood up and were counted that day.
And what's this?
This is that is Little City Books right there on the corner of First and Bloomfield. Of course, that was the first spring. It was probably the following weekend, or maybe in April, the city organized spring flings for a community cleanup. And it was the first time that we had really gotten a group together to participate in a significant kind of a way. Again, this is part of my understanding of my ministry and of what a church is about, is that we're part of a community and we have responsibilities for that community. And so on this day, we were assigned, our little group, we were assigned from all along First Street from Hudson to Harrison, which was a long way. We picked up a lot of trash that day. So that's just some of our people in their yellow shirts walking along First Street, picking up everything from trash to cigarette butts to you name it. We picked it up that day. We started at 10:15 in the morning. We were probably not done until mid-afternoon. There were only a few of us left at the bitter end. The kids bailed on us.
I'm sure, yes. Yeah. Right. You and the mayor?
Me and the mayor. This was, this was a rally for immigrant and immigrants and refugees. I believe this was around the time that family separations were happening at the border in a really big way. And so there was a rally to stand up for refugees and asylees and immigrants. And I was invited to speak. The mayor obviously spoke. Jill Singleton spoke, and some other people. But it was, again, part of that public-facing ministry to which I feel is a big part of my call. I'm very much a parish priest, but I'm also, you may recall there was an Archbishop of Canterbury back in the 40s named William Temple, who said that the church is the only society that exists for those who are not its members.
Right.
And
right.
I firmly believe that. I believe that we exist. Everything that we do as a community of faith is in service of the world. So I was very delighted, and I love the backdrop of this picture. One of the beautiful things about Hoboken is you never get tired of the view. It's really pretty spectacular.
That's very true.
Yes.
The chancel at
This
All
is
Saints.
inside All Saints Church. This was our Christmas pageant a couple of years ago. One of the delightful things about All Saints is that we are a very young congregation. That is not typical in the Episcopal Church.
So this is the Sunday school.
This would be Sunday school and other children who came and practiced a couple of Saturdays in a row in order to do this Christmas pageant on probably mid-December of that year. And it's extraordinary that our congregation skews very young, and so it's both a challenge and a blessing that we have, that we can say that, because most churches, as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of gray hair in
Indeed,
most congregations.
Yes.
We do not have so much of that, and All Saints has always been that way. But it's always been a very kind of a transitional congregation.
Yes.
People come, people leave. Although I'm happy to say most of these people here are still around. It seems to me that families are finding the need to move with that second child a little less than they used to. More are staying in Hoboken. Although I will say COVID accelerated the departure for some families. They just wanted more space.
Oh, really?
Yes. I think being stuck in a condo or an apartment or kind of feeling very isolated, if they were thinking about leaving before, I think it sped up the process, which is why when you read about all these fights over homes that are being sold and the prices that sellers are getting, it has to do with that. It has to do with families really not wanting to be in the city anymore. So, and Hoboken feels too much like a city for some, I believe.
Have you had many families who have left the area?
We've had probably fewer than half a dozen. But there have been a few that have moved on. Yes. This is a Palm Sunday procession
From Holy Innocence?
from Holy Innocence. So here we're at the corner of Garden and 6th. But so we'd walked from Willow and 6th. We gathered there on Palm Sunday, which for those who are not Christian or don't celebrate, it's the Sunday before Easter, and it commemorates or remembers the entry into Jerusalem by Jesus on the back of a donkey. And so many places have processions. It's just really great fun to be able to do it through some city streets. And we sing and we have this procession with palms on the cross, and the community sits up and takes notice. It's rather fun we'll have people taking pictures of us or filming us or joining in the singing and walking with us until we get up to the church at 7th and Washington. So it's a fun event every year that we actually have we did not do a procession, but we did gather outdoors this past year.
Now, so you're the chaplain to the Hoboken Fire Service.
I am. I'm the fire department chaplain. There on the right, Brian Crimmins, the chief. Is a member. His family are members of my congregation, and he invited me to be chaplain. He said they had not had one for a few years, and The only chaplains they had before were Roman Catholics, so they were all men. So I am the first woman who is a chaplain to the fire department. And interestingly, I think that's when I had a bit of pink in my hair, so it was really stood out just a little bit. So this was my swearing in as chaplain of the fire department, and the presentation of my helmet that says chaplain on it. And then I think the next picture is that same day, walking in the parade. That's Memorial Day. I'm beaming, holding that. I'm like a 5-year-old who wants to be a firefighter when she grows up, and I've got my helmet that says chaplain on it. That was one of the happiest days I've had, walking down Washington Street with my chaplain's helmet. Yes.
So that's Holy Innocence from the rectory, I guess.
This is Holy Innocence from the rectory. When I'm drinking my coffee at my dining room table every morning that it's sunny, I look out the window and I see the sun streaming through the stained glass at Holy Innocence. For those, there may be those who don't know that Holy Innocence is part of All Saints Parish. All Saints was formed in 1983 of the 3 existing Episcopal churches in Hoboken. There was St. Paul's on Hudson Street, which we now know as the Abbey, which is condos. And Holy Innocence was, we did not dispose of it at the time, and it continued to be used some, but then was pretty much closed up, and the deterioration has been pretty significant, and we cannot currently use the building inside. But we have been very fortunate that we've had it during COVID when the weather is warm. We use the lawn for our worship space because we're not currently worshiping inside. So, Holy Innocence is it at one time was a spectacular building. It was founded by the Stevens family in memory of a daughter who died, and it was situated where it is for the working class people of Hoboken to worship. There were no pew rents, which is an unusual thing at the time. You used to have to pay for your seat at church, which that's kind of contrary to my understanding of things, but it's what they used to do. So this is my view in the morning as I am drinking my coffee.
There's just been repairs to the north side?
To the north gable. Hurricane Sandy accelerated some of the deterioration, and the north gable separated from the building and water was pouring in. We managed to get a grant from the New Jersey Historic Commission to effect those repairs. It took a long time to do it. I mean, Sandy was in 2012, and we just finished the repairs 2 years ago, I think it was. And so that stabilized it, but it really didn't do anything to begin the actual restoration. And a restoration of a building like this would be millions of dollars, which we don't have. So we are still assessing what the best way forward is for Holy Innocence. And there's our choir.
New choir robes?
They are new choir robes. How did you know?
Was it red before?
No, it was actually white. It was like white. It was almost like homespun. It was really not very attractive. And so I said, we're going to raise some money for some choir robes. And this was actually our All Saints celebration in 2019. And we did an even song where they sang Fore's Requiem. And we have a magnificent choir. It is not paid at all, except for the music director. It is an all volunteer choir. And as the officiant for Evensong, I'm over there on the side. And it's just one of the things that is so unbelievable about All Saints is that a parish as small as ours, and it's fairly small, can have a choir that is so glorious. And we have some magnificent voices, and it's really wonderful.
And this is a confirmation class?
Well, it's not really, it's Sunday school. The teachers asked if I could teach them a little bit about what do I do when I'm standing up there at the table. And so this was in January of 2020. So it was not long before we no longer were gathering in the space. And I loved the picture so much because the kids are, I mean, they're asking questions, and they're, why do you do your hands this way? And what is this called here? And and again, I love having so many children at our church who are they're like little sponges. they aren't afraid to ask the questions about why do you do your hands that way, or what is this cloth called, or whatever it happens to be. And I loved this picture so much, we had it made into postcards that we used to send out to people.
That's right, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this is a commemoration of some sort?
This is, when I started a doctoral program, I was a doctor of ministry, and part of it, we had to come up with a project and to write a dissertation on. And my project focused on the arson era here in Hoboken. I centered on the years 1978 to 1982. Mm-hmm. I have this museum to thank for really sparking my interest, because when I was investigating All Saints history, which was part of an early paper that I was writing, I recognized that All Saints was deeply involved in relieving and helping rehome people, helping to provide emergency assistance to families that had been burned out. And so it was really part of the DNA of our congregation. And so I developed a project where we had a morning of storytelling, where I had a firefighter and a survivor and someone else talk about what it was like during those years when all these buildings burned. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that in a 4-year period, 56 people died in unsolved fires. And most of them were children, and all of them were immigrants. They were poor, they were Puerto Rican, British Guyanan. So this photo is the day we did a prayer walk, where we walked to many of the sites where fires took place. This one happened in the fall of 1979 at 133 Clinton Street. And it was the most deadly of all of those fires. 21 people died here. And so this picture shows us, we had a little liturgy, we said a couple of prayers, and we read the names of all of those who died. And then we placed flowers at the doorstep. And this shows that stop at that place. And I think the next picture is the rather iconic photo of that building actually on fire in 1979. So we were standing outside of that building. And it was my interest was really sparked by talking with so many people who lived through that era, who clearly even the thought of it brings up trauma. And my thesis was that the church and faith communities can serve as community healers. We can help aid that, because we go to where the pain and the sorrow are, and we help memorialize it through ritual and through conversation and prayer and liturgy. Right. And so that was my project, and it focused on these years. And there will be a memorial to this event. There is. We did. Just to back up just a moment, the week after the prayer walk, we were supposed to have a service, and a lot of people who had lived through that era were going to be there. They were going to light candles. Well, that was the first Sunday that we were no longer able to have public worship because of COVID. So that ended up being a pre-recorded online service later in the fall of last year. There is a Hoboken Fire Memorial Project, which was a group that was in existence before I had hit upon this. But as I was doing my research, I found out about Rosa Roscoe. There's a chapbook about her that the museum put together. And in that, I recalled reading that before she died, she wanted to make sure there was some kind of public marker for those who died in the fires. So that is still going to happen once the city finalizes the renaming of Legion Park to Tom Oliveri Park. Then that's where the fire memorial marker will go, because Tom was a Puerto Rican activist, and it was his community that was really most devastated by these fires. So that's, we hope to have that done. I'll keep my fingers crossed by spring.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is your first sermon during COVID?
I think this was the first or second service. I can't remember exactly. It probably was the first one.
Morning prayer.
It was not Eucharist any longer. We had suspended public worship, and so this photo shows my iPad, which my husband was attending to, is propped up between some hymn books, and it was really not a very polished way or technologically polished way of doing church, but we scrambled. I mean, in the beginning, we did not have the capacity to do this, and it's amazing that we did as well as we did. And now we have a much more kind of polished technological system. We managed to install a camera and a good sound system, and so it's entirely different now. But All Saints, like most other congregations, had to figure out a way to carry on. And so this was just kind of to remember what that was like in those early days when we did not know. Yeah, at this point, we were fairly naively thought, oh, it'll be a few weeks.
Yes, I thought 6 weeks. But
It was not to be, but this was the early setup with that iPad, and you can see people commenting. We were streaming to Facebook, and we have people joining in that way. It was quite extraordinary, actually.
Is your husband ordained as well?
He served as a Presbyterian pastor. He has that was a very long time ago, in a different lifetime. So he does not consider himself an ordained person. He doesn't practice that. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Christmas.
So All Saints had never had a Christmas tree outside the church. Last year, when we realized that we were not going to be in the space, we decided, well, how do we let people know that Christmas is still happening here at All Saints, even if we're not going to be in the building by the hundreds. So we put a tree outside, and we always have the wreaths on the door, but this was something we just wanted to add a little bit of festivity, because Christmas was hard last year for a lot of people.
Yes.
And we wanted to have a bit of public joy, and so that is what that's what this tree is. And
You'll do it again this year?
I think we will. I think it might become a fixture at All Saints, since we don't know if we're going to be inside in any significant numbers by Christmas. So I imagine we'll do it again. It really was lovely, and I loved walking up and walking by the church in the evenings to see it lit up this way.
So there's no firm date yet for going back to services?
There isn't. I mean, we could be inside in limited numbers, but as I said earlier, our congregation is so young. We have a lot of under 12-year-olds who can't be vaccinated, and my concern is always to prepare for those who are most vulnerable. So that's going to be our children. So rather than trying to severely limit numbers and have restrictions, we're at the moment, we're beginning to consider how we're going to do that, because come November 15th, we won't be able to use the lawn anymore. It gets too cold, for one thing, and then the Christmas trees come. Yes, that's what Holy Innocence lawn is known for, is the Christmas trees. So once that happens, we won't be worshiping outside. So we may try to start small inside, but we will not have 300 people inside the church on Christmas Eve this year. Hopefully next year, but we will see. I've done a couple of weddings in the space and had a lot of people, and I'm not entirely comfortable with it yet. So I think that I would rather be cautious, and we can continue to reach out to people the way we have been for the past 19 months. And we'll wait and see.
Did you have any restrictions at the wedding? Did you ask people if they were vaccinated?
We did ask people to wear masks, and the couples said most people were vaccinated. One of the things that I won't do is check vaccination cards. It's just not something that the church is for all people, and I trust people enough for them to take the precautions that they need. And if someone comes that is not vaccinated, I'm going to count on their masking and taking appropriate precautions, which is one of the reasons why we're not inside. I don't want to put anybody on the spot that way.
Right.
So, and a lot of my colleagues are having services inside. We are the bishop in the Diocese of Newark and a group of people keep an eye on risk levels. And right now in Hudson County, we're still at what's considered the orange level, which is fairly high risk. Until that gets back down to yellow, I'm perfectly happy not being inside.
Okay.
Yes.
Christmas again, I sure.
This is actually a COVID memorial that we did. It was a pre-recorded liturgy, and this was just the setup that we used and filmed. I filmed my portions with this, and then one of the gifts of COVID, if I could say there's a gift, is that I have learned to video edit and sound edit and put things together in ways that I never in a million years imagined I would do. And so having a kind of a visual and a liturgical remembrance of the victims of COVID was really important. And so we did this. I was probably during Lent last spring as around the 1 year anniversary of our no longer worshiping in person. So that's just I thought it was a beautiful image, and it was a really moving, it was a moving service to put together, even though I was very diligent about, all the technical aspects of it. I found it to be a very moving thing.
Right. Now, am I right in saying that the entire roof of All Saints is being repaired?
Right now, all of the slate portions are being replaced. The slate, the cornerstone of this church was laid in 1855. That slate roof has been up there ever since, and it has deteriorated to the point where it was chipping off, and we were getting leaks. And so we managed to get a grant for part of it from the Diocese of Newark. We put in the rest of the money. We're getting all of the slate portion replaced, and then there's some other patches that will need to happen on the parts that are not slate. It's an old building, and it as with most old church buildings, there's a lot of deferred maintenance that takes a lot of money to do, but that project should be finished fairly soon. It looks like they're about done.
Fantastic.
Yes. Are there any more pictures? I can't remember. Yes, this is outdoors. This is our outdoor worship on the lawn at Holy Innocence. This was on Pentecost at the end of May or early June.
How many people do you typically get?
Well, this day we had a couple of baptisms, so we had, I think, about 90 people that day. Okay. We get anywhere from, it's actually gone up, anywhere from 40 to 60 on a normal Sunday, and a couple of weeks ago we had over 100 for a baptism. So we continually get new people who they see us on a Sunday, and then the next Sunday they come back and join us. Or one young family Googled and found a group worshiping outside, and they showed up. So we're getting lots of newer people showing up at All Saints. Who are finding us because we are outside. I was
about to ask, so people walking past being interested in coming in.
And a lot of times people walk past and they just stand outside and listen to my sermon or listen to a hymn or listen to the music or something. Take pictures every now and then. I'll see on Instagram somebody has tagged All Saints in a picture. Yeah.
Do you think it's something that the post-COVID you might continue on?
Well, I think that there have been in the past, I think in the summertime, from time to time, they would do an outdoor service, on occasion. But I could see us doing maybe an early service at the church in the summer and then doing the later service outside. It's really, it's challenging because there's a lot of street noise, garbage trucks, ambulances, Willow is where on the way to the hospital. Right. But I enjoy being outside, and we live stream from outside. We have that capacity. So I do enjoy it. I mean, I miss the inside of the church, which has such a lovely feeling of home. But this has been a great blessing to us to be able to have this space. There's not a lot of private green space in Hoboken to use for this.
That is true.
I know some other places have used parks or whatever, but we have our own space that we can use, and that's quite a gift to us. So this was this year's, I'm actually wearing the same jacket. Look at that. This was this year's September 11th memorial. And I am the kind of the mistress of ceremonies for this, and organized the Clergy Coalition. I do want to give a nod and a shout out to the Clergy Coalition, to Rabbi Rob Scheinberg, who's really the convener of the group. I am very much about interfaith work and ecumenical work, and having a clergy coalition in Hoboken, as I had in Charlottesville, I think it's really important that faith groups do what we can. The more of us there are, the better. And so every year, the clergy coalition and the city have gotten together to do a 9/11 memorial down on Pier A. And so this was a picture from this year, but I do recall my first year here. As I said, I arrived in February, and sometime along about August, somebody said to me, "Well, what are you doing for September 11th?" And not having lived here at the time, I was taken aback by that question, because obviously I remember it every year and maybe add some prayers to the Sunday liturgy or something. But here in Hoboken, because that loss was so great, obviously they have a memorial every year. So for the first couple of years, I would open up the church, I would ring the bell, and I would take part in this civic service. But I had to scramble that first year because it did not occur to me how significant this day is in the minds and hearts of the people of Hoboken, because it was an extraordinary loss of 56 people, most of them young professionals going off to work in the financial district in New York City. Right. And to hear emergency service personnel and others who lived through it talk about it, it is very reminiscent of people talking about the arson era. You know, the trauma does not go away with the passage of time. And so, again, finding ways of marking it and ritualizing, I think, helps people find space to heal and gives some comfort. So it's a great honor to be a part of this. And obviously, as fire department chaplain, it's also something that is I feel part of that role as well.
What do you recall what you were doing on 9/11?
Yes, I was actually working in Philadelphia. I was at Episcopal Community Services. I was the director of human resources right downtown. We were told to leave about mid-morning because there was some concern that they were going to try to attack Independence Hall. You know, they were going for symbolic places. Right. But I do remember sitting in my in my office, and my assistant saying that her husband had just called her and said that a plane had run into, a commuter plane had run into one of the buildings. And then a little while later, he called again and said, no, another building has been hit. And so it was not long after that I tried, me and, a million other people tried to get out of the city of Philadelphia on public transit. And I do remember my husband, when I was finally on a train, because I lived in the suburbs, and he called and he said that the building fell, and I could not in my mind imagine until I got home and actually watched it on television that I couldn't imagine that happening. And so I remember as vividly as everyone else, as with any national tragedy, where were you when JFK was shot, or whatever it happens to be, right? I remember walking to work that day from the train and remarking what a gorgeous day it was, the blue sky and all of that. And that's what people tend to remember. So I do remember that. And a friend of mine who was the priest at a church that I would go to a midweek service, he became one of the chaplains for the morgue up at Ground Zero. And so he would tell me about his experiences with that. Yes.
And that is it.
That's it.
Okay.
We went through all of my pictures.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
It's been a delightful. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And Rand, are the important announcements coming up? So we have the next episode with Dave Schramm coming soon. And I want to acknowledge the memory of Donald Shachet. Am I correct in saying that? Shachet. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And of course, the New Jersey Historical Commission for all their help. And of course, Applied Development Company. So thank you so much. And of course, naturally, the latest exhibit in the Hoboken Museum you should check out, called The Avenue, A History of Washington Street. And that is now open. And of course, in the upper gallery, we have the Caveman Built My Skateboard. And so we highly recommend that as well. And that is that. Thank you so much.